It'll be the first time.
We got to work hard by the end of the day.
Well, he works Landon County.
All right. Everybody, this is Miss Joyce. She's our employment law attorney from Prisoner Group, and she'll be giving the meeting today.
Hello.
Your attention.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I appreciate y'all being here. You're the guinea pigs. You get to be the first ones. So, we are recording this so that others can view it, but I do want you to feel free to ask any questions. If I say something and it's just not clear to you, then don't be shy. Call me out on it, and, because I can probably do a better job of explaining what I mean if I haven't made it clear. We, and I just found a typo in this handout that's supposed to say foster and work in an environment that's free of any harassment or disparate treatment. So pretend we all call that one together. When I talk about protected categories, I'm talking about those 14 things that are in that box. And what it means to be in a protected category is that an employee cannot be treated differently because they're in one of those categories. Everybody can always be held accountable for doing their job. You're hired to do a job, and if you're not doing that job, then there's a real good chance you're gonna hear about that from somebody. We also have policies and procedures that are in place to protect everybody, all employees. We have policies about coming to work on time. We have policies about coming to work at all. We have policies about what to do when you feel like there's a problem, who to tell. So we have a whole handbook full of policies that every employee is expected to follow. That has nothing to do with a protected category. If you're not following the policies, you should expect to have a do-better conversation with whoever your superior is. Protected category doesn't mean that somebody can get away with not following the rules or not doing their job. All it means is that they are not singled out for either disparate treatment, we call that being treated differently, but treated differently because they're in a protected category, not treated differently because they're not following the rules. So that would be discrimination if you're being treated differently because of a protected category. But you also can't be the target of jokes or coworker harassment because you're in a protected category. So the 14 protected categories haven't changed. We've had the same 14 for the last 4 years now. The last 3 to be added were transgender, gender identification, and sexual orientation. But at a federal level, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission believes that those have always been covered under gender harassment. But they said, just to be clear, we're going to name them separately, but it's not really anything new. So when you're making jokes in the workplace or commenting about someone in the workplace, just make sure that your commentary or your jokes aren't related to one of those protected categories, and there will not be a problem. But I often get asked this question. We have a team that works really well together, and we can take good-natured ribbing, and we often do that with each other. Is that a problem? It might not be a problem today because they like you today. But the minute they don't like you anymore, they're going to remember every single joke you ever told that had anything to do with national origin or race or gender or age. Sometimes we make comments in the workplace about women in the workplace or about people, older people in the workplace and what they can or can't do or should or shouldn't do. And that can be considered discriminatory comments that can end you up in trouble. even though you didn't intend to offend, you thought it was funny. Those are some of the cases that we deal with in county government on a regular basis. A group of employees, joking and laughing about one of the members on the team that's older, and here, let me help you with that, grandpa, or let me help you pick that up, or, oh, somebody your age shouldn't be lifting things like that. We hear stuff like that, and then that employee can later use that as evidence of being treated differently in the workplace. And in claims like that occur against, in this case, it would be against the county, you will be named, because when they make a complaint, they have to give specific examples and who was present and who said what. So that's why it's so important to be professional and to not use anything that's related to the common ones are age and gender. I'll tell you that number one used to be race, and it's not anymore. It's now more about gender and then certainly about age. Does anybody wanna share, or do you know what the federal government considers to be protected under the Older Worker Act? What age do you think it covers?
65 and over.
65 would be an excellent guess. Because if somebody had asked me that question before I knew the answer, that's exactly what I would have said.
60.
40. The federal government says if you're over 40, you have protection under the Older Worker Benefit Protection Act. So I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hands if you're over 40, but just know you're in a protected category called age. So someone who has protection under age, in our standards, might not at all be old, what we would consider old. But anybody over 40 has that protection. We frequently, it gets commented to us that, oh, I'm a white man and therefore I don't have any protection, and that's just not true, because there is protection under federal law for all races, all gender, all religion. So you will fit into some protected category out of these 14. Every single person in this room has legal protection for being treated differently because of some protected category. So it's not, I don't want to be too rigid or harsh about this, but I think it is so important that you understand that everything that comes out of your mouth might not impact you today, but your coworkers have a year to decide whether or not they were offended by what you said. One whole year. And then if they decide that they were offended, and by the way, what do you think might impact their decision on whether or not they were offended? This is when you talk. Whoever's holding the microphone, either use it or pass it. He's trying to get rid of it like it's a hot potato. No, why do you think someone might laugh at your joke today and be offended at it a year from now?
If they get mad at me.
They get mad at you? What if their supervisor finds fault with how they're doing their job and they feel like they're about to lose their job? Now, they might run into HR and say, this has been going on out there for a long time. Look at the names I've been called. And then when Tracy calls you to ask about it, you're gonna say, well, we are all laughing. It was just a joke. I didn't intend to offend. Unfortunately, your intentions don't matter. What matters is the perception of the person who files the complaint. So it's really not okay to ever joke about any of these protected categories. in the workplace, because people have a whole year to change their mind about how they feel about that. You know, we had a situation fairly recently where an employee came forward with all of these things that had been said in a group that had always worked real well together. But the employee had started to slip a little bit and following the rules, and, you know, they were missing a lot of work. And when the supervisor kind of came down on them about that, they said, well, you know, I've really been in a hostile environment for a very long time. And it's just hard for me to come into work and continue to be called names and be the subject of the jokes. Now, they just turned what was going to be discipline for them into a report of harassing behavior, a hostile work environment. The supervisor was so caught off guard because he's the one that was having the conversation with the employee about their attendance. And he's like, well, you never complained about this. You never told me. And the employee said, I didn't know I needed to, because in some of those occasions you were right there. You heard it. And the supervisor said, yeah, but you were part of the group that was laughing. Nobody seemed to be offended. And the employee said, oh, but yeah, I was offended. I was just laughing to get along. I was just going along because everybody was laughing. I didn't want to be singled out as the one that was offended. Now, every single thing that employee said is exactly what a plaintiff's attorney or a judge wants to hear. Had that employee been coached? Probably, because he sure said all the right things. I didn't complain because I didn't know I needed to, because you were there, you heard it. And I laughed because I didn't want to be the only one not laughing. I didn't want to be further singled out. All the right things. So you never know how something you say today might come back and haunt you in the future. So it's just best to stay away from that. I also want to spend, if you'll turn the page over and look at the back page, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about two other topics. One is a topic that's getting a lot of attention right now, workplace violence, and that's kind of a quippy kind of term, workplace violence. But we're going to talk about exactly what that means, and then we've got, y'all heard about Amendment 3, right? Y'all heard about that? I suspect that unless you've been living in a vacuum somewhere, you've heard plenty of commentary about legalizing marijuana for recreational use. So I want to talk, and there's based on the current polls, there's a high probability that that's going to pass. So I want to talk about what that means for the county. So first, let's talk about workplace violence. We have an expectation here that all of our employees will have a safe place to work without fear of any kind of threat or actual violence from a coworker, from any of the citizens that you encounter, any of the vendors. It's actually anybody that you encounter in your job. And if you work for any county, it's not unique to Taylor County, but if you work with any county for very long in public works, you're going to encounter a citizen that's not happy with you. Have any of y'all ever had that happen?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. Sometimes the citizens haven't read our handbook about how they're supposed to behave when they're talking to you. And you have every right to report bad behavior, because we have an obligation to protect you from bad behavior. So we want you to let us know if you've got someone who is speaking to you in a manner that's concerning, or if they act like they're kind of gonna bow up or anything like that could indicate potential violence, please let us know, because we can't fix what we don't know. but we will absolutely protect you from any of that kind of behavior. Yes, sir.
What about when, a residential person will say, I'll just call a county commissioner?
What about,
Because you're working in an area, they come and they're talking to you, well, I'll just call Commissioner so-and-so.
oh, the citizen says if you don't do what they want to do, they'll take it to a higher level.
Right.
That's their right, just smile and say, absolutely, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, go do that. That's fine. Because they can, and that's exactly what they should do. They should be taking their problem to you anyway, if they don't like what you're doing. Because my guess is you didn't wake up that morning and decide what you were gonna do. Somebody else developed a plan for what you were gonna do. And if they're not happy about it, that's exactly what they should do.
Case in point, I'm in an area, I'm working on the roads, and someone tell me, you ain't gonna grade this road. You're not gonna do this. I don't want this. You stop right there. Well, according to the county and what I've been hired to do, I'm supposed to, if it's a county road, then I should be able to do what the county expect me to do.
Absolutely. So if the person stands between you and your equipment, we're not gonna run them over. That would be wrong. But what we can do is call law enforcement and say, call your supervisor and say, I got a citizen out here that's standing in the road and won't let me do what I'm supposed to do. What do you want me to do about it? Let them call law enforcement if that's what they want to do. The citizen is in their way. That is a threat to you. Because if you don't do your job, you're gonna get in trouble. But we also don't want to encourage an interaction with the citizen. So, at that point, I would say stand down and call your supervisor. If they're not blocking the road and they're just jawing and just giving you a hard time, then just say, I respect your opinion, I got a job to do, and then get in gear and start doing it.
And the reason I address that is because sometimes even your silence can be used against you.
It will be, yeah. You didn't agree to do what they thought you ought to do, or you ignored what they thought you ought to do. Absolutely. Yeah, always get your superior involved if it includes a citizen, because you can't control the citizen. We can't control the citizen, but we can send people to support and help you as you're doing your job. Thank you for that question. It's a very good one. Yes, sir?
Just to follow up on what he was talking about,
Yeah, those microphones work better if you turn them on.
yeah, well, they didn't tell me that.
Let that part out.
Yes, opposed to his point, sometimes in the field, in the heat of the moment, especially now with the political tensions and all this kind of stuff going on,
I know.
legally, I know we're parties, but we're also individual citizens, so we have certain rights as citizens. In the heat of the morning, if there's immediate danger, and I don't have time to call my supervisor, to what extent can I defend myself?
You cannot. You simply cannot. Violence is never the action, and if you were to participate, you lose your job. We have a zero tolerance for violence, and so we absolutely cannot return a threat with another threat or violence with violence.
So if they're beating you up, you're not allowed to defend yourself?
Ms. Joyce, I believe our policy says, that you can leave the immediate area.
In the danger of threat of danger, yes, absolutely, absolutely. You can always walk away. And to your question, we can't defend ourselves. In a situation like that, when there's two people involved, if it's not on camera, believe me, the other person's gonna be telling a different story. So better to always walk away, make a phone call to your supervisor, go get in your truck or get another employee with you, to say, this is what just happened. I need help here. Always okay to ask for help. not okay to strike back. Does that make sense? I know it's hard. I know it doesn't make sense, right? In the world, I get it. But in the workplace, it's a different.
I get it, we're public people and we gotta do, but if somebody's like not giving you a chance to back win or beat you up, what are you supposed to do?
Hopefully it won't come to that.
I
But
don't either, but I'm just saying.
typically, if something like that does occur, unless the person's just unhinged, yeah. When you're not striking back, they're gonna quit. Because you're not inflaming the situation. But, hopefully, have any of you encountered a situation that you felt like you couldn't get out of? Yeah, hopefully it won't come to that.
Well, not that I couldn't get out of it, I got out of it, as I obviously not be, I got out of the situation, but the person was under influence or something, you know?
Oh.
So I don't think, cause I don't swing back, he gonna stop attacking.
Yeah, and that's one of those situations where they're not of sound mind. And, yeah, I get it. Call for help as soon as you can, because that's the best way out of that. Supervisor law enforcement, if that's what you feel like needs to happen in a situation like that, where we have someone who's not acting rationally. Absolutely. We always want you guys to be safe. In every situation, whether it's a citizen or another coworker, do the very best you can to diffuse a situation. And the best way, always, the best way to diffuse a situation is to agree with the person. Even if you know they're wrong, it's always okay to say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. I appreciate your perspective. I'll tell my superior, I'll tell my supervisor, whatever, and walk away. Yes, sir.
So, and I know this don't cover everything. I know this don't cover everything that we're gonna discuss today,
Right.
but there are some things that, you're going down the road, you motor grading, there's plenty of room for a vehicle to pass, and then you get accused of running them off the road.
Yeah, well, again, there's always two sides to every story, right? And in the absence of a camera, we'll never know. I get it, but if there's a camera, that's awesome. If there's not, then some of it comes with integrity and the trustworthiness of our employee.
And for time's sake, well, as our leaders, they should be there for us. Am I correct?
I don't know. I need to know more. When you say our leaders, you mean our supervisors?
Our supervisors, yes,
Okay, they're
correct.
not at the job site?
Right.
Okay, if they're not there, they didn't see it, right? But in most cases, there's gonna be somebody at the job site with you or no?
There's times that, like I say, you can't, every situation you can't possibly discuss that you're gonna encounter.
Of course.
But there have been instances where I've been grading the road, and I get called in, said that I run somebody off the road. Now, am I to acknowledge that, yes, I did run them off the road, or?
Well, you're supposed to tell the truth. Did you run them off the road?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well then there you go. You can sleep at night, so can I.
Okay, thank you, I'm just.
Frustrated, I get it. I get it. Yes, sir.
Can you explain the recording policy? When can we record somebody? Say we're trying to leave the situation, we got a phone out, and the policy says we can't visually record somebody. So we point it at their feet, or is this situational?
Okay, so let me tell you what the law says about that. In Florida, we are what's called a two-person consent state. We can only record with permission. Permission doesn't have to be overtly provided. It could be provided by the person knowing that you're recording the situation and not telling you to stop. So if you're doing it, and not trying to openly, yes, and not trying to hide the phone, then when the person doesn't refuse, then we have implied consent. If you think about, and you may have some of these notices up around the courthouse or the other county buildings here, but if you think about pulling into Walmart, on all of those light poles that go way high in the parking lot, at the top of them, there's a notice that says these premises are under surveillance, and some of them say by entering, you agree to being audio and video recorded. So, yes, sir, did you have a question? Somebody pass in the
But as
microphone.
long as you're in public, I thought you were always free to record.
No, sir, not in our state.
That needs to change.
Run for office. Yes, sir. The only reason we're being such sticklers about the microphone is because we're recording this for other people. If they can't hear the question, then the answer is meaningless to them.
Well, I just had a quick question about, a while ago you said, I don't know, if somebody starts being aggressive or whatever towards you, agree with them to de-escalate.
Right.
What if you're agreeing with, things that are on the sheet that you shouldn't be agreeing with?
Oh, well, don't do that.
Where does that leave you?
I think
If
the
they
answer,
start saying this person's that and that person's
Yeah,
that,
and they're
yeah, I
calling
agree with
people
you, yes, I
names.
agree with you, where does that leave you?
just say, I will make sure my supervisor knows that you've got a problem. But you're right, we can't assume that everybody that you're gonna encounter is rational. They may very well be making some irrational statements,
Right,
derogatory statements about one of your coworkers.
right.
Don't try to be the hero and defend that person. Just tell the citizen, if that's who it is, that you will report their concerns to your superior and that you expect that they will hear from someone.
I'm understanding you trying to settle them down and go, yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right. Just trying to keep from getting in a fight with them or whatever. And have you agreed to what they said?
Not necessarily.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I would not be concerned about that turning into any kind of claim. In the heat of the moment, you're doing the best you can to de-escalate a situation. I have agreed with people before in a very intense setting just to get them to sit down. And not because I agreed with what they were saying, but because I needed them to believe that I was gonna sit there and listen to them.
Sure.
So,
I
sometimes,
they can't cover every single detail of everything, but just generally.
right, yeah, thank you.
The recording issue, does that apply to like dash cams?
No,
Because,
no,
say like you have a dash cam on your equipment or your truck.
technically, the law would apply, but it's not being negatively enforced. And I have wondered that same thing myself. Because we know that when law enforcement wears the camera, that it's visible and obvious. But if someone with a dash cam is recording you, you would not know it, until you see your tag number show up on Facebook or something, Instagram. But one of the things that I have seen that I suspect they're using to avoid that is blacking out identifiers. So faces or tag numbers or, whatever. And there's a whole lot of stuff that's on Facebook that causes me to think, oh, that wasn't right, that they shouldn't have done that. But you're right, it's not being enforced, for sure.
So would there be a simple to like Google Maps, whatever, just right down the street, record your home and everything else?
Yeah.
Or you want it, it's acceptable for them to do it, but not us?
Well, because they're not videoing or audio recording an individual and what they're saying. Remember, the recording law, when it was written in Florida, was about telephone calls,
Right.
recording telephone calls. It has been interpreted over the years in court cases to include video recording as well. And you know, if you ride down the interstate and you see that little solar panel on the right-hand side, that's camera. So the state's doing it all the time. All right.
Not to get hard today, but it's not true to the rule, the saying that there's no expectation of privacy in public.
Well, I mean, that's kind of an urban myth. That, and I will tell you from personal experience, if you're almost anywhere, there's red light cameras, we just talked about the interstate. People have Ring cameras on their homes. I saw a request from law enforcement yesterday on a social media site requesting that people who lived on certain roads who had cameras on their houses to call law enforcement because they were looking for video of a particular truck that might have been on one of those roads. They were trying to figure out what path did the bad guy take when he left town. And, which I guess would then enable them to kind of figure out where he was headed. So law enforcement is using these cameras of citizens in them doing their job. So we may very well see that this comes up. It won't be on this session because there's no room for it. But in January, we may see that there is some loosening, I will say, of those rules. There is also a Florida statute that says that if you are on public property, meaning state-owned, or I guess county or city-owned property, then you should have, that you are subject to being recorded. So, and that's also, there's a statement in the DOT rules in the driver handbook that mentions something like that too. But if you're taking out your phone and you're recording someone, it would be important to be very visible that you're doing it, or to say to the person, you know, I've been in situations before helping clients with a problematic employee situation, and I see the employee take their phone out of their pocket and turn it on and then put it in their lap. And I just bend over and get as close to them as I can, and I say, my name is Joyce Chastain, and I do not get permission for this recording. So if anybody ever says that to you, shut it off. Yes, sir.
How about just the work environment in itself? Does that apply to it, even though it's not audio or visual, as far as people go?
Tell me what you mean, the work environment. You mean like if you're in the office or something?
Or you're working on a bridge and you just want to record it for situational purposes. Say a supervisor tells you to fix this or fix that.
Yeah, so if you want to like record something that was broken and now it's fixed.
Or it could be potential hazards to you, potentially, that you refuse to do work.
No problem with that at all. Be careful about refusing to do work, but we do, one of the rights that an employee has is to report unsafe conditions. So if you believe that you've been sent into an unsafe environment, then tell a superior, and if your superior is not listening, then you can always talk to somebody in HR, or who else would they talk to? Luana, maybe? Yeah, always. If you feel like it's an unsafe environment. And taking pictures of a work site is very different than recording a person who's talking to you. Yes, sir?
Yes, so we will be protected if there's a resident videoing us performing our jobs. Because sometimes that can put you in a harassment. I mean, that's kind of, to me, it's a harassment. I can remember just a few months ago that I was in an area working and somebody videoing me.
Well, maybe it's because they wanted to tell your superior what a great job you were doing.
I beg to differ.
It doesn't always have to be bad.
Yeah, well,
But if they were videoing you, then they probably had a purpose. But I would say carry on, do your job. Do your job to your very best ability to do your job. And then if they show somebody footage of what you're doing, hopefully it's gonna show that you were doing your job.
Just make sure we're being protected, because there are people out there doing these things, and then they'll turn around and try to use it against you. So we need to make sure that we're there for one another.
We always wanna be there for one another, but we also don't wanna give any of those people evidence to use against us. So if we're doing a good job, we won't have any, we can all sleep well at night. Yes, sir, did you have a question or, okay?
Yes, ma'am, I want to just comment on what he's saying there. We was out on the beach road, and my tractor had went down, and I was sitting there waiting for the mechanics to come out, and I look up and I see this guy on the four-wheeler, side by side, just sitting there looking at me. I waved at him and the motion to come by, but then later on, he went and told the other coworkers that he had me on video. He was recording me sitting there doing nothing.
Doing nothing, yeah.
So
So he doesn't know the whole story, but your superiors do.
Yeah, but it's just like, and I mean, he said he was gonna report
Yeah, he did.
me for that, for just
Yeah.
sitting there doing nothing.
I
And
understand,
I'm doing a terrible job, and I'm like,
because he didn't know the whole story.
no.
And people often jump to conclusions. We just want to make sure we're not giving them any evidence. And as long as your supervisor knew you were sitting there, your tractor was out of commission, you were waiting for somebody to bring some help,
Mhm.
then his complaint will go nowhere. He may complain, but it's not a valid complaint. And there's
I know
nothing you
that,
can
but it's
do,
just-
absolutely nothing
Yeah, I
you can
did.
do about that situation. Pass this gentleman a microphone back here.
You got it?
Oh, he's got one, okay.
What if they put you on Facebook or something?
Oh, well, they will. They absolutely will. Yeah, and if that happens, you need to let your superior know, so that it can, if it is necessary. Sometimes you don't wanna be too defensive about situations, you just want it to go away. But sometimes we can intervene and ask that citizen to remove it because they didn't have the whole story. All right, we're gonna run out of time and not be able to talk about pot.
Hot as bad, okay?
I'm sorry, what now?
Hot as bad, okay, unless it's prescribed.
I still didn't get that.
Hot as bad, unless it's prescribed, okay?
Well, come November election day, we may have a different result. We'll see. As I said earlier, the polls, the political polls are saying that it's very likely to pass. It has to get 60%. So we have it on authority. Somebody over here said it will. And I believe, I agree with you. I believe that what we're going to see is that it might vary by county, but I think the total state results are going to be that. Before we get too deep into talking about that, I want to finish up talking about workplace violence, because I know we kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent, but I want to make sure that you guys know what we need to be looking for when you see a coworker behaving in a different way. Sometimes that's related to their personal appearance, that they're not coming to work as clean or groomed as they once were. One of the first signs that psychiatrists tell us of someone who is depressed is they stop taking a shower. So you have a coworker who's coming to work and maybe they're not as frequently enjoyable to be around as they might have once been. And I'm not saying that somebody who's like that is going to commit violence, but that is one of the things that they suggest that you look for in coworkers. The other thing is when there's a conversation going on and the person seems to flip a switch and just get really angry or emotional, begins to tear up, and it seems out of character for a way that they have been before. Someone who's been goofing off, and we all do that from time to time, but now their goofing off seems to be more risk-taking. The horseplay becomes more reckless. You should, in all of these cases, you want to give your supervisor a heads up. You're not squealing on somebody, you're actually protecting that person as well as your other coworkers. Anytime you recognize that someone is coming to work after having been drinking, or you think that they're on some kind of illegal drug, or even if they're on a prescription medication, but it is altering their performance, they're impaired, that's not okay. Even though they may have a prescription for it. And then anytime someone makes an overt threat, even if you don't believe that you think they were joking, you don't believe that they really are gonna carry it out, you have a duty to report those things to your superior. Again, we can't fix it if we don't know that it's like that, but we will provide assistance at any job site for anyone who feels like a situation is not safe for them. If you feel like there is danger or a threat of any kind of violence, I want to make sure everybody understands that. We're not expecting you ever to defend yourself. That's the county's job, that's law enforcement's job. Okay, now that I've said all that, let's talk about what's gonna happen when recreational marijuana gets passed, since we're also sure it's gonna happen. First of all, it's only for individuals over 21. Anyone under 21 still cannot legally possess marijuana. And there is a cap on what you can have in your possession without criminal penalty. That's for your personal world. The rules related to marijuana in the workplace are not going to change. Certainly won't change for what we call safety, security, safety sensitive positions. Have y'all heard that term before? That's for people who operate heavy equipment, anyone where a CDL is required, because marijuana continues to be a Schedule I drug at the federal level. And commercial driver's license rules are written in such a way that they expect someone with a CDL to cross state lines. So even if you don't cross state lines, if a CDL is required for your job, or your job has been classified as a safety sensitive position, then you cannot have evidence of marijuana in your system at all. That doesn't mean that you did it last night and you're not impaired now. It just doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you have a medical marijuana card. Those two types of positions are excluded under the current Florida law, and that is not going to change under the legalization of marijuana. Now, in some of the states that were early adapters of recreational marijuana, went back after marijuana was approved for recreational use and created state statutes that said an employer could not discipline an employee who took advantage of any legal activity, which meant an employer couldn't discipline an employee if they tested positive for marijuana if it wasn't about them using it at work. And that continued, when Florida wrote Amendment 3, that was already written into it. But again, that would only apply if you weren't in a CDL position or a safety sensitive position. And what that means is you have the right, if this passes, you will have the right to personally partake of marijuana in your own home the exact same way you do beer and liquor and wine now. You can drink at home or in a restaurant. I was in Las Vegas, well, actually a year ago in October of last year. And if any of you have been to Las Vegas lately, you know that there are smoking bars set up there where people can go in and in the bar smoke. It's just like you would order a drink, only you order a joint. And there's also vendors on the street, along the strip, that shops that, you know, you go in and purchase what you want. But interestingly, in the airport, there are signs everywhere that say you're on Nevada soil in this airport, but the minute you step on that plane, you're not. So marijuana is not legal on the plane, it's legal in the airport. So Florida will have similar kinds of things that will occur, but written into this legislation is that where you can purchase it are places that are already approved for medical marijuana. So if you have a distributor for medical marijuana, that will be the place where you can also go and get recreational marijuana. Now, when we look at how will the rules change for the workplace, they typically won't change much. You cannot show up to work impaired from anything, whether you've got a prescription for back pain or any other pain medication. You can't take that even with a prescription and come to work if it renders you impaired. You can't bring recreational marijuana or medical for that matter. You cannot bring marijuana onto county premises. That will not change. You will not be able to bring it in your pocket, and you cannot use it on premises even if it's not the workday. You can't use it during the workday, and you can't bring it on premises. So that's not going to change. Just the same as you can't bring liquor onto the workplace, or you can't, drink at lunch. So when you think about, but it's legal, yeah, well, so is drinking. It doesn't mean you can do it and come to work. So the rules aren't going to change, except that discipline issue if you're not in a safety sensitive or CDL position. That's the only change that we will see in the world, in the workplace for sure. We will continue to have zero tolerance for a drug test if you're in one of those positions. And you probably know if you're in one of those positions already. So what that means for you is if part of a random or a specific drug test and you test positive, you're gonna lose your job, because that's the way the law is written. It's not our rule, that's just the way it is. So even though it's gonna be legal for personal consumption, it's not gonna change much in the workplace. Any questions on that or comments?
Well, for those who have this marijuana, and I don't, but anyway, just for
The medical
clarity,
marijuana card?
yeah, for
Okay.
clarity's sake, if they're in a position, heavy equipment operator, what should they do? Should they step down from that position and go to a less sensitive job, or that doesn't require?
Or take a different medication. Medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, either one, continue to be Schedule I drugs, which means at the federal level, there is still a crime. The more states that approve it for recreational use, the greater the chances that it will be decriminalized at the federal level. But if you are in a safety-sensitive position or a CDL is required for your position, if you test positive, you will lose your job. Here's part of the problem, and I'll get on my soapbox for just a minute. Testing for marijuana is not good. It doesn't tell us whether you're high right now or you used it last night. But if it's a crime for you to use it in your position, like for safety sensitive and CDL positions, it doesn't matter if you used it last night or you're high right now. If you did it at all, it was a crime and you're gone. So I don't know, I can't be any plainer than that. If you're not in a safety sensitive position, medical review officers tell us that they can tell whether or not a person is high when the drug test is administered because of the concentration in the urinalysis. But the only way to truly know the THC level, which is the psychotropic part of marijuana, is to do a blood test. Well, employers, that's considered a physical exam, a medical examination, and employers typically don't do blood tests. They collect urine and do a urinalysis. So, and we don't have, you know how if you blow, if you get pulled over and you blow and it's greater than 0.4, you're drunk, right? No question about it. That's because we have a regulation, we have a statute that says in our state, 0.4 is drunk. I don't care whether you believe you're drunk or because of your size, you can have more to drink and not feel drunk. Doesn't matter. The law says 0.4, you're drunk. We don't have that for marijuana. We don't have a test that says THC at certain level, you're high. I don't know if we ever will. I just know we don't right now. So that makes me real, I don't like our testing options. And I will tell you this, our testing options haven't improved since medical marijuana was approved. How long have we had that? 7 years, 8 years, maybe longer? It's been a while. And testing has not changed. So that's why there's zero tolerance for safety sensitive and CDL positions, because it doesn't matter when you did it, it was still a crime. And they say that CBD can stay in your system for up to 30 days. And if you're a regular user and someone who's using it for medicinal purposes would likely be a regular user, it could stay in your system longer than that. Doesn't mean you're high right now. Yes, sir?
Is every position with the county road department considered a safety sensitive?
I would not think so. I haven't looked at the job descriptions, but I would not think so.
HEO ones, HEO twos, those are safety sensitive because they require a CDL.
RMTs as well, they require Class B. It's on the job description. Your office manager does not require CDL licensure, but for the most part, purchasing does not. But for the most part, almost every other position that you have requires a CDL licensure.
Even the RMTs without CDLs?
I believe the job description says a Class B.
They changed it.
Did they change it?
They changed it.
Okay, well then not the RMT.
They're not required to have a CDL anymore.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you for that. Okay, well, we have run out of time. Happy to answer any other questions that you might have, but I also want you guys to be able to get back out there and do what you do. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now. Anybody else? All minds clear? All right, thank you all so much. Y'all have a great rest of the week.
Are we gonna continue to have these trainings
We can if you'd like to.
Yes, I think we need to
All
because
right,
it's,
we'll figure it out. Thank you for letting us know your desire.